Hello, this is Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments, and welcome to the latest video. Today I'm talking about why it can be good to get divination, or why it can be good to get a second, or like a divinatory reading as a second opinion on a situation in your life, because I think it's sometimes very valuable. I don't know about you, but I do sometimes do divinatory readings for myself on situations in my life. And typically when I do the divinatory readings, I'm doing them as a way to get some perspective on a situation. I'm not really looking to divine the future. I'm looking at how to discover um, variables in the present that can help me understand how a situation is unfolding. Not that divinatory readings couldn't give you some perspective on the future, but really, I think a lot of times there we're really looking more at probabilities. And of course, the divinatory readings can influence those probabilities, as I've discussed elsewhere in my books on space-time magic. But I think that sometimes it's useful to get a second opinion on a divinatory reading or via a divinatory reading from someone else, because you can be too close to a situation. It could be a situation you're too close to emotionally. It could be, where you have too much emotional weight invested in the situation. It can be a situation where you have too much intellectually invested in it. You're not able. You have a lot of thoughts about it. It could also just be a situation where you just want to get a second opinion for the sake of having the second opinion. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this. But I think it's useful to get some perspective in terms of your magical work, so that you, by getting a different perspective. In my case, I do a lot of tarot card readings. I have a dual deck reading where I use two different types of tarot decks together to do a reading. I've also recently gotten an alchemy deck, which I've been playing with, and I've found to be pretty accurate to the circumstances that I'm applying the reading toward. But even so, I've been like, well, I have these particular these decks, and I have a couple other decks. I've got a reading a deck, a Voyager deck that I use as well, like an old Voyager deck. So I've got a couple different decks that I use for these kinds of things, and they're pretty handy. But I find that it can be really helpful to understand like what kind of reading you're doing to sometimes get a different perspective, and actually get a reading that's done by someone else from a different perspective. I've seen people who, for example, have done readings with bones. So that's one way that you could do a reading. There's readings with cowrie shells. I recently had someone do a geomantic reading for me. So he had like a system of numerology, basically, from what I could tell. And he created a specific chart and showed me how that reading, and basically did the reading for me, and walked me through how it related to the circumstances. It was a standard yes or no question, and I sent it to him because he was looking for people to practice with. He wanted to practice on something, and so he wanted to see if other people would be willing to give him that opportunity, and I was happy to. I basically asked him a yes or no question about a circumstance in my life, and he helped me out by doing the reading, and it confirmed some details that I needed confirmed. It provided some illumination in some aspects that I didn't necessarily see. And what it really demonstrated to me was the value of having that second opinion, because it wasn't just me relying upon my own reading and my own biases, but it was somebody who didn't really know me doing a reading for me about a situation in order to help me understand what the factors were in that situation. He didn't know a lot about me. I mean, he knew next to nothing about me. And that was a really useful thing, because by not knowing that much about me, it kind of gave him the opportunity to do the reading without having too much intimate knowledge of me and who I am and what my circumstances are. So it made the reading more powerful, because there were details there that he simply could not have gotten without knowing me, or knowing me fairly well and knowing what was going on in my life at the time. So I think that, sometimes if you do your own divination readings, hey, great. Just recognize that you're always going to have a little bit of a bias towards yourself in some ways. You're going to be bringing with you the knowledge and information that you already have about a given situation. And it can be useful to get someone else's perspective, because what that person's perspective brings to you is something, especially if they don't know you, it brings an objectivity, if you will. I mean, there's still some subjectivity. That person might guess certain things. That person will bring their own lens to the situation, but it's a lot less than what you're bringing to the situation. I mean, but you can also have somebody do a reading for you that's a friend of yours and still get a second opinion. You just have to keep in mind there's going to be some bias again. But even if you have someone do a reading for you about a situation and they know you fairly well, they'll have the benefit of knowing you, and that has its own benefit and downside. The downside is they may be a bit biased, but the benefit is they do know you, and they may be able to point certain things out that you might not be paying attention to otherwise. The downside, of course, is, like I said, they know you. There's a bias there. So you just want to kind of keep that stuff in mind. I found it really helpful for this kind of. I find it helpful to occasionally just go outside and get someone else's perspective, whether it's a friend or an acquaintance or somebody I don't even know at all. Sometimes it's good to just get a different perspective, because it will give you clarity in ways that you might otherwise miss out on. All right, thanks for watching and have a great day.